I am. So my name is Anne Richardson. I'm the Area Dean of Aston and Sutton Coldfield, which means I work for the Church of England, but I chair this committee by virtue of the fact that I live in Stockland Green rather than by virtue of any particular role that I hold. So I am a community member just like all of you, or many of you, so I don't represent the council on this. I chair the meeting as a kind of a community member. And in fact, most of the people who are here this evening are members of the community and those who we have invited in to the meeting to speak to particular issues, rather than being people who are here representing the council. And from the meeting that we had held 2 weeks ago, it just felt quite important to start out by saying that. If you would like to speak at any stage this evening, particularly because many of you have your cameras switched off, so I can't see you waving your hand, if you could, under the reactions button, put your hand up, that way we will know that you're looking to speak. So we're going to take on this evening the bigger ticket items from the previous meeting, which are the neighbourhood plan, the Safer Streets bid, and then John will talk about some of the items around the Commonwealth Games community and grant funding, which we did touch on at the last meeting, but we'll see when we get that far who hasn't heard all of that, and we'll pick some of that back up. And then there'll be some community updates depending on where we are in terms of time and those kind of things when we get that far, and also who's here to speak to any of those issues when we get to that stage. So if that all makes sense, we're going to start with thinking about a steering group for the neighbourhood plan. And Ifor, it doesn't have your name against it, but I'm going to hand that one straight over to you.
Okay, so Leslie, if you put the presentation up for everybody, as we discussed. Shouldn't take long to fire up. Good. So this is a presentation that we used and prepared for the steering group, which is probably 4 to 6 weeks ago. And we had a discussion around this. And we did some mapping following on that meeting. So if you go to the first slide proper. So if you remember, we agreed in principle that we would explore a potential neighbourhood plan following the presentations from the planning department, principally Doug, who's in the meeting tonight, and also Councillor Hunt from Perry Bar, where they are further down the track on this. And in particular, we talked about the geography and the potential boundaries for a neighbourhood plan, some priorities that a plan could set out, and how we would move forward in making that plan happen. So let me just go through to the next slide, which will give you a bit of an oversight. So this is the roadmap that's been produced by locality, which we have borrowed from, and they wouldn't mind. We are members of locality. So there are 3 stages in setting up a plan. The first one is that you designate a neighbourhood area. You need then to designate a neighbourhood forum, and talked about a steering group. It's effectively the same thing. You build up an evidence base. That's a range of things, some of which we have already. For instance, the housing needs assessment we produced last year, but also and layering in a whole range of other things like the index of multiple deprivation, etc. And then undertaking some publicity, initial publicity on those, on the draft area, and engaging with the community on that. Second stage is preparing the plan more formally, drafting it, and there are particular conditions which Doug talked about for that plan, and then making a pre-submission or making arrangement for pre-submission consultation. So there's a second round of consultation. And then after submission and the publicity around that, there will be an independent examination of that, and then a referendum of the community. So thinking about the community consultation, there are two informal parts and one formal part. So if you go to the next slide, Leslie. So neighbourhood planning bodies, is important to understand what they are. They can be a parish council. In our deliberations, we said that we wouldn't be thinking of that, of being a parish council such as Sutton Coldfield Town Council or frankly Parish Council in South Birmingham, but that we would pursue the neighbourhood forum route, and so that would be our preferred option. Work can only commence when the neighboured area has been designated by the local authority. Tonight, we've got some draft boundaries that we want to check with you to see if they're right, have we missed anything out, and then we'll get to the stage around submitting them to the planning authority, principally through to Doug. So where there isn't a parish council and we're going down the neighbourhood forum route, we need 21 people. There are nearly 21 people in the room tonight. So there isn't far to go if there's interest in this, in bringing in more people. The neighbourhood forums, once we've drawn up terms of reference and a constitution, that needs to be approved alongside the boundaries by the planning authority. It's usually the case that you apply for the neighbourhood area first and then the neighbourhood forum, but you can do them both at the same time. Moving to the next slide. So in shaping the area, there are a range of options, and we had those discussions in the reference group, in the steering group, after our last ward, the ward meeting about 3 months ago. So we're going to get you and show you some maps of that in a minute. And of course, the advice is to engage with local groups and residents in this process. We need to do a little bit more consultation on what we've come up with. So one possible step from tonight would be to go out with what we've got to see if this is about right before we submit it to planning. And there's a key point here that the foundations of a good neighbourhood plan are developing a sound evidence base and robust community engagement right from the beginning. So next slide. Okay, so as we said, submitting the defined area for planning approval is the first hurdle to clear. And there's some technical points about the area here. So a plan can only have one area, but the area can, and this sounds complex, but the area can include more than one neighbourhood development order. So there can be quite a lot of texture in it. So the plan can actually specify different types of developments that you'd want to see in an overall planning area. But it's important to note that you can't have overlapping areas. So if we wanted to have a plan that was coterminous with, so say for instance, one in the Witton Lodge and Perry Common, if they're two defined areas, we can't have a bit in the middle that belongs to both. It's really important to think about the concept of a neighbourhood in that, and that it makes sense to people. It is their place, it's where they live. They identify with the boundaries. It can be large or small. It can be based on a local centre, retail, housing, owner occupation, private rented housing, social housing, employment area, a park, or combinations of, and ours is exactly that. Let me go to the next slide. So, possible steps in identifying the area. The group defines the neighbourhood as a starter, and we did that with the initial discussion with the steering group, and I thought it was a really strong discussion. But of course, that was an initial discussion. Then discuss it with the planning authority, then engage with local groups and stakeholders, identify a core area, and then some potential add-ons. I think tonight we might want to do that. Have we missed a part or that we want to add on to the plan area? check with people in different parts of that neighbourhood to see if they're on board with it. And this is a really important one, to define the boundary margins using physical features, road, rail, canal, etc. And of course, we've used the M6, which is a definite physical boundary. So moving on. Okay, so to move it forward, we need to submit the area with a map, and we have that, a statement explaining the area, and we can produce that quite quickly. I think we have some emerging evidence, and also a statement showing that our proposed neighbourhood forum can be defined as a qualifying body. So then the local authority will publish this as soon as it receives it and give an opportunity for people to make representations. And the decision process needs to take no more than 20 weeks, and they need to respond somewhere after week 13. So it's going to get a little bit more interesting soon with some maps. So if we just move on. So the next step was to come here to this ward forum, and then to go on to the September forum to advise planning of our intention, and to hold a community workshop in September and October and present the initial proposed area, explore the themes and the potential priorities. Moving on again. So the principles that we've used the locality guidance principles, which take into account the government's own principles, and it comes out of the Localism Act in 2011. And we've used local knowledge from our steering group. Of course, I think we need to go deeper than that, hence the beginnings of a discussion tonight, and then a discussion in September. So the first map. So if we go to the next one. So this is the draft area. So we discussed this, and then Anne drew very quickly the boundaries on a piece of paper, and I then sent them to our planning student, who then produced this map. So you'll see that it includes east and west of Slade Road. It goes up to the railway line towards abutting Gravelly Hill ward. It uses the M6 significantly. It uses the residential area south of Brookvale Park, and bang in the middle is Brookvale Park. One of the discussion points is, should we continue that further along the green corridor that goes up towards Linda's territory in Perry Common? So we can have a debate on that. And we've got Highcroft Community Centre designated in the middle of that. That's not really necessary. Going to the next map. This is a Google map in real picture. So gives you a different perspective. You see the central swathe of HMOs between Brookvale Park and Slade Road, and a little bit beyond. You see a different type of housing to the south of Brookvale Park, and you see some potential for other development southeast of Brookvale Park as well. You go to the next slide. Alex plotted the index of multiple deprivation. That's the 2019. So you'll see the darker shading is most deprived, so that's amongst the 10% most deprived in the country. That's based on the 2019 figures. That will change with the new census data. And also, if you look at the data that Maggie O'Brien included in the housing needs study, the actual deprivation is probably greater for a range of factors to do with the exempt and multiple housing situation, particularly in crime and ASB and other features. So if you could then go, we can show you to the next map, we can show you how it links into, it's a bit fuzzy, with the ward. So it's about half the ward. So Stockland Green ward is a 2-councillor ward. Birmingham's now made up of either one council ward or two council wards, population circa 20,000 plus. So this is probably 11,000 people living here. And it's broadly the south part of Stockland Green. Going to the next map. So we had a debate, and this is just a recording of that debate, which Alex, our student, shaded in for us around some potential land uses that we might want to make. So obviously Brookvale Park, leisure and amenity improvements. Mary's been working there, particularly with KRT, and has started that process. There's a long way to go. We could obviously be pushing for significant investment there. The blue part is potential housing development for, family housing, and we discussed waterside regeneration under the iconic Spaghetti Junction. And then the purple parts, so darker purple and light purple, designated as housing and community safety improvement areas, particularly the light purple, which is the target area for safer estates, which we'll talk about. So we're nearly there now. Just last slide. Sorry about having 16 slides. So they're the draft boundaries. You've seen the maps. So we now need to engage with Doug. He's here tonight, so it'd be interesting to have his views, and suggesting that we present these, as said, at a workshop in September and October, and then finalise the boundaries and submit formally to the City Council and submit. And then we'll need to look at the funding that we need for the programme. We've had a discussion on that. We have a small allocation from the city, but we'll be able to make an application for more. I think we talked about 10,000 and potentially more for areas with greater deprivation. So that's it.
Thanks, Ifor. I wonder if you might, just for those for whom this is their first meeting, very quickly, say 2 or 3 things about how having a neighbourhood plan, for example, in the light purple and dark purple areas, what are the things that could leverage for us? Why would we bother? Just for people for whom this is their first meeting.
So a neighbourhood plan, and Doug would maybe chip in on this, is a local version that builds on the city's unitary development planning. I think they maybe called something else these days, but it forms part of the city's spatial planning policies. What it can do is inject local flavours. So on Friday evening, I was having discussions with people in Balsall Heath who developed the neighbourhood plan, and they've seen some really positive development that they've seen come about as a result of their neighbourhood plan. So in a pretty run-down part of that area, they've now seen a whole range, for instance, of Turkish cafes, and that's breathed new life into that area, new investment, and having a regenerative impact. So what you can do is designate particular land uses, and what you're trying to do is to influence development in the future. So it's a medium long-term strategy. It isn't a universal panacea for the issue in relation to the difficult housing issues, but it's one that when you take that alongside the Safe Streets programme and potentially wider interventions that the city are making and need to make, including legislation, can begin to reverse the process of what we've seen in Stockland Green, but it won't do that immediately. It's something that you need to start working on to leverage that longer term change.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really helpful. Anyone got any comments or questions either for Ifor or for Doug or for anyone else in the room? Linda, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think there's a case for adding in Wiley Birch and perhaps Witton Lake, so that you've got 2 great parks that can actually work together, although they're very separate offers, if you like. But Wiley Birch is in the same position as deprivation as the areas you've marked on the suggested boundary. And I think we'd be missing a trick if we didn't include it.
Yeah, we did have quite a conversation about that, didn't we? I think the only reason it didn't get included was we were trying to not make it too big. But by the same token, if we then leave bits out that have a common flavour, definitely worth having a look and see what those boundaries might be, with the thing around fixed and identifiable boundaries.
Yeah.
We could add that as a supplemental and consult on that.
Yeah.
Or I can ask Alex to do that.
Alison in the chat just raised a point there. The other thing we need to think about there is, because you can't have overlapping projects and plans, if there are areas that are thinking of setting up their own, we don't want to steal their territory, which would then mean they couldn't then have.
I don't think I've heard of any. Wiley Birch has never come up as mentioned in any neighbourhood plan, to my knowledge.
No. But they've never. There's never been anyone from Wiley Birch, with the exception of you, Linda, represented on the group. So that would be
Wiley Birch, but yes.
But you kind of speak their with their voice, I suppose, at this more than anyone else does, and it would be important, certainly, that amongst those 21 people, there were voices from Wiley Birch present.
I just think it's worth thinking about.
Yeah. And again, I mean, the thing about the Witton Lakes and with the Eco Hub and things like that, there's definitely a commonality, isn't there, between the two parks?
Yeah.
Ronnie.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Just two quick comments, I guess. I think, first of all, Ifor, that we would welcome consultation now, so that this is not presented as a de facto offering of what the neighbourhood boundary or the neighbourhood plan should be. I think the people in the community should have a way of shaping that where they think these lines ought to be drawn. And I think also we should recognise that in trying to then bring forward a plan that empowers residents to have a say how their community is developed, maybe that is a testing point as to whether you can then coalesce other areas into the same offer. Because primarily Stockland Green may be faced with different issues to the other surrounding wards. We have an issue of 437 exempt accommodation properties, and many of the people around here feel that they've had enough and would like something done about that. So I think we need to bear in mind as we go forward with this. Can you still hear me, anyone?
Yeah. We can hear you.
As we go forward with this, we need to make sure that it's measured insofar as what an individual ward is concerned about. We are concerned about those issues which we've raised many times, which don't seem to be improving, and in fact seems to be getting much, much worse. So I think that those are the 2 points I think we should bear in mind.
Yeah, we hear that. And I think one of the advantages of the neighbourhood plan is it allows us to highlight areas within the plan for which there are particular focuses. Anybody else got anything they want to add? Doug, anything that you wanted to say, reflecting on what you're hearing so far?
Yeah, I was trying to put my hand up, but I couldn't work out how to do it, so I do apologise for my technical ineptitude. I think probably, to be fair, Ifor's covered anything. From the last meeting, you'll probably gather that I personally and professionally think it's a good idea. That it will give the community more control, and it does give the community the ability to sort of put forward their own agenda. The boundary that Ifor showed looks sensible to me, but I don't live there, so from a pure sort of geographic perspective it looks right, but there might be other things that need to be brought in. I like the fact that some of the positives of the area, the park and things like that, were included as well, because I think it's all about not just addressing the challenges, shall we say, but also the opportunities to sort of celebrate the things that are an asset for the area as well. And I'd also agree with Ifor's point that it's not going to be a panacea for all the problems that have been discussed at these groups and we're well aware of, but it's probably one of the suite of approaches that we can adopt to try and make improvements in the area as well. So I think probably what I'm saying is, I probably agree with everything that Ifor said in his presentation, you know. So
Brilliant.
And can I just make a point? That Wiley Birch is in Stockland Green, and they have the issues of houses of multiple occupation too. And so I think there are similarities that can perhaps help both areas within that ward.
Definitely, when we are consulting, we need to make sure we consult widely, I think, so that we come up with the right plan. I saw a hand. Dave.
Hey there, everyone. So my question really is, I think Ifor mentioned engaging the community around September, October time. So what kind of format will that take so that we can maximise the amount the community is involved? Picking up on the points that Ronnie and Linda have raised, I think it's of paramount importance that we try and capture the mood and the drive of the community here. Would that be online, for example, a large public meeting or something? Do you have any idea?
Shall I respond to that, Dave?
Sure.
Yeah.
So, listening to what Ronnie and Linda said, I think, and wider discussion tonight, if we adjust the boundaries and add different options, so the Wiley Birch flank, if you like, if we add that in, and that we also produce in story form, like a storyboard of what it is, and then get that out straight away, and we can do that electronically, and we can put that up in some of our community venues, and the likes of Uzma and other Mary and others who are in the community can hold discussion. And so that's the first step. And then we build up to the September, early October workshop. So we don't know where we're going with, COVID, and we thought we were, everything was going back to face-to-face. Hopefully it will. If we can, it would be really good to have a face-to-face workshop. So it's like a planning for real, where everyone can look down at a table and look at the boundaries, move them around, and touch and feel. But obviously the public health situation means that that's not necessarily the case. If we can't achieve that, we'll have to simulate that on Zoom or on Teams. So ideally we would build up to a traditional face-to-face. If we can't, then we'll have to consider the other option. So my proposal is, let's get the information out in storyboard form today, including the additional boundaries. I can ask Alex to map those quickly for us and get some actually printed out, and then pick them up electronically and physically in places, and let's get some views, and then let's get into the meeting and look at those comments and deliberate on that. And let's do some more work also on what how neighbourhood plans have been used, particularly to tackle housing issues across the country as well.
I'd be really up for us having a series of smaller in-person in different bits of the ward too, because we know that some people, particularly if you live right over one end of the area and you don't drive, having to schlep over to a public building right on the other side can be tricky. Whereas actually the upside to my presence here is that I have access to whole loads of buildings because of all the churches that we can use as public spaces in which to hold these things in a COVID safe way with plenty of air, but that allows us to be flexible with that. Penny.
Hello, I firstly just wanted to apologise for joining you late. I was in another meeting that ran over that I couldn't get out of. It was COVID related, so I apologise. I just wanted to really support what was being said. In my experience, the many different types of consultation work best. So some people prefer to fill a form in that comes through their door. Some people prefer to do it online. Some people prefer the planning for real in lots of meetings. And I totally agree with Anne that we should have at least 4, because there are kind of 4 quadrants to the ward. So we should have at least 4. And I would be happy to be part of all of those. And we really just take it from there. You know, it's important that that plan, we always said that plan was going to be active and that plan was going to be live and would change. And as things are developing and we're getting more investment in certain areas, and although our overriding problem still remains the same, we've got more tools to use now to try and affect those. So I think it's important that we have those local consultations so that people can direct how they want us to use some of those tools that we've got. So yeah, fully here for that. And once again, my apologies, guys. I just couldn't get out of what I was in before.
Not gonna lie, Penny, I hadn't noticed you weren't here at the start. You could have kept totally quiet about that.
Fair enough. I'll try not to be offended.
There's quite a lot of us in the room. Yeah, I agree. And I think from my point of view, the other thing is, I mean, for those of you who were with us 2 weeks ago, the deep and abiding frustration within the community at the moment, we need to be able to hold in tension this sort of medium to long-term thing with the deep pain, actually, of living in certain bits of the ward right now. And make sure that when we're communicating about this, we communicate really clearly so that people know exactly what it is we're trying to achieve, have a real sense of the way that this could impact on the life of our communities in the long term, but not pretend that A, it's the only thing we're going to do, because it's not, and B, that it's going to fix everything by a week next Monday, which it's also not. Because yeah, I totally hear the pain and the frustration that people are feeling right now. Anyone got anything else on this? Because it leads us quite nicely into the next point on the agenda otherwise. I hear silence and I see no hands apart from Penny's. I'm assuming your hand is still the last hand, or is that a new hand?
No, apologies, I was tardy in dropping my hand.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Ifor, we're still on you and Amelia then to talk safer streets and funding for that.
Okay, so again, we've got a little mini presentation, and we've also got some draft terms of reference, which I can summarize for a steering group to oversee that. So Amelia, do you want me to do this, or do you want to do it? I'll start it. So if you remember, about 18 months ago, the round 2 of Safer Streets was advertised just before the beginning of COVID, and there was support within West Midlands Police for a potential bid from our neck of the woods in Stockland Green. 12 months later, Amelia contacted me. So yeah, Amelia said for me to go ahead, I will. So Anne said, look, we're back in, let's make a bid. This is a real opportunity for us to access real funding to begin to make change right here, right now in Stockland Green, and within particular targeted areas of Stockland Green. So we worked with the City Council, and we used our fundraiser, Alan Crawford, who worked with Amelia, and input from others as well. And ultimately, this was the top priority going in from the West Midlands Police and Crime Commissioner to the Home Office for round 2. And we were funded just under £500,000. So, and Amelia, after this, if you come in on some of the more technical assessments that were undertaken to shape some of the programme elements, or if I cover off the top lines. So if you go to the next slide, Leslie. Okay, so the different, some of the different stakeholders, or the planning, this is about the planning areas.
Can I just, is it possible that we could maximise that? Because I don't know about anyone else, but I'm struggling to read the text. Is it possible to launch that PowerPoint just to make the
apologies for that.
words a bit bigger? My eyesight's not that good anymore.
No, don't know how I can. If you go
On the bottom right-hand
Bottom right, there's
corner.
a picture of a screen at the bottom right.
oops, smaller.
If you go all the way down to the bottom right-hand side of the window, underneath where it says spelling, program, resume, etc., 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 there are 4 icons. So down a bit and right a bit from where you are. There's like that's the one.
Like the golden shot.
Marvelous, thank you.
Okay, so the planning area. So the first thing is a high impact area. So Erdington High Street and Stockland Green, this part of Stockland Green, just off the east and west of Slade Road, is designated as a high impact area and one of the major priorities for West Midlands Police in relation to community safety, antisocial behaviour and serious crime. So that frame was used as evidence in the submission of the bid. We worked through USMA and everybody to develop our ward plan last year, which we adopted as a ward forum, and that's now published, and that was also referenced. In terms of the details of the accountabilities, the City Council and the Community Safety team, which Amelia works with, will relate to the Home Office, supported by a community partnership manager. And we're going to say something about that at the end of the presentation, because we now have one. We've moved very quickly. What we need is a Safer Streets Stockland Green steering group. Now we've got to watch all the governance that we have. Earlier we were talking about the neighbourhood forum. There's this ward, and there's a proposed steering group for this. But it is vital that we do have a steering group to steer the priorities for the interventions, and also to approve the community engagement budget. More on that later. And then we've also secured a commitment from Highcroft to be able to use the centre and one of the large rooms there as a base for tasking from all agencies and for use by community groups once a week. And we have that over a 12-month period, and that can be, the launch pad is focused activity by all agencies working together, working to support communities. Next slide. Oh, we're going wrong way. So these are the this is just an overview of the programme. So the Police and Crime Commissioner, that's where the bid went. The City Council body, and they've appointed the Pioneer Group through a service level agreement as the community partner, because we're active and hopefully trusted within the ward through the work that we're doing here to do that. I'll just be very clear that there is no money being made whatsoever by the Pioneer Group. In fact, we're putting resource in as match funding, and we're doing this pro bono. Just be absolutely clear on that. And then the steering group, as I said, will make the decisions on the community engagement budget, and there is a significant and quite, a decent sized budget there of just under £30,000, and we want a community majority on that steering group in making those decisions on that pot of money, so it can be used appropriately. Next slide. So within the locality setting, we work together as a set of partners across North Birmingham in what's called an LPDG. Amelia, you might be able to tell us a little bit what that stands for, but effectively that's the join up between different statutory agencies in North Birmingham. We're here in Stockland Green Ward Forum. We're going to create the reference group, and we in the Pioneer Group are the community partner working to support and service the steering group, as I said, on a pro bono basis. Next slide. So that's me at the top at the top there in terms of managing the work that USMA does and we're proposing to try and boost that potentially up to 2.5 days a week, possibly 3. At the moment it's 2 days, and we have appointed a community partnership manager, and I'll introduce Ned shortly. If you then go to the next slide. So there are 9 interventions in this program, and I quickly rattle through these. Any technical questions on this to Amelia, because she is the author of the program effectively. So an environmental visual audit, street lighting upgrades, CCTV installation, and we did have a discussion at the last meeting on that, and that's mobile CCTV. Next slide. So number 4 is improvements to security I think that's to individual dwellings. Cleanliness of service roads and alleyways, something Stockland Green Action Group have been doing amazing transformational work on a voluntary basis for 15 months, 18 months. Prunage of foliage, say that. Next slide, number 7, multi-agency visits to all households. So we're going to try and get round to all households with the relevant agencies. New exterior locks and interior door alarms, and an intensive community engagement program to be shaped and led by our community groups. So those are the 9 elements of the program. That's the investment. Moving on to the next, only a couple more slides. So what we want to do is to deliver that program 100%, absolutely, to get them to hit the ground running. And we've moved really quickly to mobilize it. But then to link it to the ward plan, to the emerging neighbourhood plan, and to our whole approach around tasking, to link it in, and we need to hook this into the resources that the much talked about City Council's supported pilot housing programme. There are resources there that they need to work with what we've got, and linking in with wider initiatives within the ward and within the constituency around wellbeing, employment, community development, and then to create a succession plan. Going alongside this, and I think 3 months ago, I presented on Haroon Chugtai, who's the sector inspector, is working on a plan, a 4-point plan for the impact area. So that's the Stockland Green part of it, as well as the Erdington High Street. And those are focused on housing, drugs and antisocial behaviour, community, and one other area. So what we're saying is this is in the here and now. And if we are smart in the way we deploy this, we can use this to try and begin a journey where we can get more investment, get the neighbourhood plan off the ground, make sure that the partnership working is appropriate, and then look for other wider interventions as well. So I think that's the last slide. Yeah, so terms of reference, let me quickly summarise that. So we need a group to oversee the programme, those 9 elements. And I think it'd be useful if, Leslie, if we can send this around. In particular, we want the group to make the approvals on the community engagement portion of the funding, and then also to provide advice on the tactical deployment of some of the other measures. So where would the mobile cameras go? When should they be moved? Where should the lighting be? Where should the alley gating happen, etc. So tactical decisions and the strategic decisions on the community engagement side. We will have, I'm proposing West Midlands Police, the City Council, the Pioneer Group, somebody from the Ward Forum, Ward Councillor, but then more people from the community groups. So Stockland Green Action Group, 3 or 4 people, the Friends of Brookvale Park and Highcroft Committee. And initially, we'd probably be wanting to meet either monthly or 6 weekly. We can keep the meetings relatively short, but the more we're focused on this, the more direction we can give to the work that Amelia does in getting the commissioning of the capital side with Ned Crochet-Markwell, who's in the house here with us. So if you wave, Ned. Ned was interviewed by myself and the police and the city last week. He, without embarrassing you, was an outstanding candidate with all the necessary experience to deliver this programme. But the key feature of what Ned told us was that he would build everything around community engagement. And that was the centerpiece of his presentation, and would serve and work with all the community groups. And you know, that was sincere, and we really did put him through the mill. So we needed to get this done and dusted pretty quickly. Ideally, I would have you know, had some community input. Failed in that process, but that's what I think earmarked Ned from the other candidates, was that feature, as well as technical competence. So that's the programme. Is there anything, Amelia, of a technical nature that I've obviously missed?
No, because I think we could probably pick that up when the terms of reference are circulated to everybody, and if anyone's got any question now. I mean, from me, the key bits to echo are the point Ifor's made about this is funding that we've secured for 12 months. It always makes me a bit nervous just to get such short-term funding for what is quite a, you know, some entrenched long-term issues. But it is an opportunity, and what is really key to me when I was working with Ifor on this, and you know, when we went out and we did the community site visits which informed the bids, is that this has to be a launch pad. This has to act as a platform for more work, so that yes, the investment is, this initial investment is for 12 months, but that it can grow into something that is going to make a much more long-term and sustainable impact within this area. And then the second point for me, which again is equally as critical, is the and which Ifor has already referenced, which is again around the involvement of the community as we sort of grow and embed this bid in the area over the next 12 months and beyond. I think that's going to be critical. You know, you are the guys who live there, you are the guys who are there when we're not working, and so it's really important that exactly as we were just talking through the neighbourhood plan, that this is something that is that has your that has your fingerprints all over it, if that's the best expression. Probably not, but I think you get my point.
There's been a question from Alison on the chat, so Ned doesn't live in Stockland Green, but he lives just down the road in Great Barr, and has worked the last 7 years in Castle Vale, and it was effectively a professional appointment, somebody who can deliver that programme, and we needed the confidence that they could do that, but not to do anything to the community, but to work with them and to serve the community. And the work I've seen Ned do, leaving aside the robust interview that we undertook last week, I am sure that he will deliver to those values and fundamentally build everything around the community.
Ned, is there anything you want to say? We're talking about you a lot. Is there anything you want to?
I'll chip in very quickly while my daughter isn't screaming the house down. Ultimately I'm not a local boy. I do help out my friend on my friend's allotment up at Marsh Hill, so I do know the area a little bit. But ultimately, that's why I think that it's really important that this whole process is led by the community. You guys know what the real issues are. You know where it's happening. You know how to, you know where these resources should best be put, and how to kind of advise on the sort of tactical deployment of that. So, you know, I don't want anyone to feel that this is that we're doing this without you know, to the community. This has to be, as far as I'm concerned, community led. If we want it to succeed, it has to be driven by the people who already live there, who are already doing fantastic work.
Thank you. Ronnie.
Sorry, hi again. I think another thing that we need to recognise, and a lot of disquiet is moving around Stockland Green at the moment regarding this funding. I think the funding is extremely welcome. At the same time, it creates a sort of like oxymoron position, because we're delighted to have some funding come in, but it also recognises how bad the situation is. We sort of won the funding. And also now, what's coming to the fore is, well, without having Birmingham City Council fully engaged with fundamentally addressing the problems that they are party to causing here in this ward, that what is the purpose of that funding, or what will it achieve? Because essentially, if Birmingham City, we've made many protestations to them about deploying now Article 4, they can do that now, they could do that last year, they can do that at any point, to stop the growth in HMOs, of which they say they can control, they can regulate. If they don't actually make an active plan to implement that now, then the growth of multiples increases, and a lot of the problems in this area stems from the exempt accommodation side and the HMO side. So deploying £400,000 on the ground tactically will just mean that, well, as soon as you move the problem or address the problem in one particular part of the housing stock, it just moves further or migrates further down Slade Road to another area. So you never fundamentally address the problem. The problem is about density. The problem is about number. And I think in conjunction with the plan of as to how the money is going to be spent and what areas will be prioritised as a result, is that Birmingham City Council need to come off their fence and also contribute to the exercise of making the situation better on the ground over the medium term and going forward from that. Medium term would be then regulation being seen to control the exempt accommodation. In the short term, they could make the situation better today by turning around and saying, we will implement Article 4 of the GPDO, General Permitting Development Order, and we will stop any further development of HMOs in the Stockland Green Ward, Erdington area. 437 exempt properties in this area is just beyond ridiculous. And some of the roads that we live on, there's 4 roads, maybe 70 odd properties. So we need to address that. This is the elephant in the room, because we can spend that money and then in a year's time, we'll see no improvement on the streets that we live.
Thanks, Ronnie. Penny, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I just want to say, I support what Ronnie says. I don't in any way want to disagree with it. And I fully understand the frustration. You know, I live a few roads down from Ronnie and experience the same thing. The only differential I would make is that where the law allows us, we do deploy Article 4, and we will continue to deploy Article 4. You know, and we object to all the HMOs that come up, or at least all the ones we're aware of, and we rely on the community to help us with those objections. As everybody's aware, the exempt accommodation is a little bit more difficult, but we're hopeful that we're making some progress with the government around giving control of licensing for exempt properties back to the council, which will allow us to do exactly the same thing. But I just want to slightly challenge the idea that we just randomly sign off every property that comes to us, because we don't. But that doesn't mean I don't feel the pain, and it doesn't mean I don't feel the cumulative pain of the fact that we've got the most. We absolutely do. And we're continuing to work on that. But if Ronnie's got any direct stuff that he knows about that I might not be aware of, that he wants to talk to me about offline, I'm more than happy to do that. But to my knowledge, we continue to deploy Article 4 where the law allows us to. And we will continue to fight to get control of the exempt properties.
I think for those who were present at the meeting we had 2 weeks ago, which was just days after that property on George Road went through, it highlights the problems that still exist in that area. Ronnie, did you want to respond to that?
Sorry, yeah, just quickly want to come back on that there, Penny. I think what we're saying, we're not talking about Birmingham City Council judiciously putting Article 4 in, say, a cul-de-sac where they choose to think, well, that's not sufficient. We're talking across the ward now. Birmingham City Council have the powers today. We spoke with the managing director when he came down here a few weeks ago. They have the power now to say that the density situation in Stockland Green has well surpassed any reasonable limit. In other words, we can say we have as much as we should ever have had, and we don't need any more. And then they can manage the housing side. Let's put exempt accommodation to one side, because Birmingham City Council can't do anything about that. They're not regulated. But on the side that is regulated, when you look at the numbers of HMOs that are now on the ward, there is a limit. There's a point where you have to say, well, how many can this area accommodate? That's that point a long time ago. So what we want to see is the Birmingham City Council joining in this initiative to improve the area by saying, right, Stockland Green as a ward has sufficient HMOs to be going forward with, and therefore we will license no further HMOs in the ward de facto, all the way across the ward. Now, what that means then is that the resources that Birmingham City Council have can be more judiciously used across the ward, because they will be targeting a specific concentration of HMOs. So if those are breaking the regulations of it or the provisions with their license, they can be switched off. But at the moment, we seem to be going from, well, just open another one, just license another one, just license another one, just license another one, to the point then where it just becomes this area where people are living in, which is chaotic. And that's what we want to see an end of. We don't just want the money spent, because the money, you know.
Okay.
We welcome that. We want to see action on the street where the council stop using rhetoric. They get off the fence and they say, right, we are going to address this problem by physically making sure no more HMOs can be developed in just a small area.
Okay, Ronnie. The only thing I'll say is I totally agree with you. As far as I'm concerned, there shouldn't be another single HMO. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to the chair of planning and find out why that's still continuing to happen, because I'm of the same view as you, which is the legislation that we've got in place for HMOs means that we should already have exceeded our maximum. So if you'll bear with me, I'll talk to the chair of planning and find out what's going on there. And if you'd be willing to join that meeting, very happy to, or if the forum wants me to bring the chair,
absolutely.
If the forum wants me to bring the chair of planning to answer those questions directly, I will do, but that's a decision for the forum. But I totally 100% agree with you. When it comes to HMO, we should have a zero policy, which is not a single one more. Obviously, I'll take that forward as and when, and I'll drop you an email tomorrow, Ronnie, about how we go about that. But if the forum wants that to be at the forum, I'm happy to facilitate that.
Thanks, Penny. That would be helpful. Now, interestingly, so when we had this conversation 2 weeks ago, might even have been last week, I've slightly lost the plot. Ifor and I took on the commitment to chase down what had happened with that Slade Road planning that had just gone through. And essentially, I mean, Ifor will correct me if I'm wrong in this, the short answer is there was no choice. It came through the permitted development route, and therefore there was nothing we could do about it. What you're suggesting now is that that's not true.
What I'm suggesting is that we get the answers directly from the chair of planning, who knows the legislation better than I do. I won't lie, councillors are a jack of all trade and a master of none. So I'm not an expert on planning legislation. My understanding is that policy of Birmingham City Council says that there is a maximum density. I don't want to get too technical and bore everybody, because ultimately what people want is solutions, not excuses. But there is a slight kink in the system, which says if it's been operating for over 10 years as one, it automatically goes through. That's planning legislation. I can't change the law, although we should be campaigning to change the law. And there's a couple of other little quo vadis things around that they use. But what I'm suggesting is we get the answers direct from the expert on planning, because my understanding is the policy allows us to limit them.
I think if we could do that, that would be helpful, and probably not something but certainly there would be an appetite to hear that.
Would you like to arrange that? Would you like me to include you in a round of emails to get the chair of planning and the director of planning to the next ward forum?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll take that on, no problem whatsoever.
Brilliant. Thanks, Penny. Ifor, continue. We not exactly sidetracked, and actually it does knock an item off the agenda for later. You'll be pleased to hear.
I think that gives
steer us back to
in terms of the Safer Streets programme. So Ned will hit the ground running right at the beginning of August, and that's when we're going to start the programme. So we need to get the steering group in place so that we can begin to make decisions on the community engagement budget and also on the deployment of some of those capital elements. So before the next meeting in September, we will, if you like, construct and hold a meeting of that advisory group. So with the ward forums blessing, we'll make that happen and talk to the people that are on. So Les will be sending out the terms of reference. So if everybody has a look at them and they have any issues with them, let me know. I think they're broadly right, and then we will start getting the show on the road.
And how do you want to go about finding people to be on that steering group?
Well, if you give me, there's a brief in the terms of reference, and we'll follow that. So we'll invite people, the likes of Ronnie, the likes of Malcolm, people who are on this call, the likes of Mary, Penny, as obviously the ward councillor. So, and I think it's important that we meet early so that we can start getting direction and start deploying. I take Ronnie's point earlier, but seeing £500,000 worth of investment in Stockland Green is a start, and the sort of policy we're pursuing is putting that in place and then building on it as quickly as possible.
Mm. And so I suppose if there is anybody who receives the that document who thinks, actually, I know a person who would be a brilliant advocate for this community, to talk to them and then send their details your way or Ned's way.
Yeah, initially me, and then Ned will sort of take over when he gets his feet under. Well, it's 1st of August, I think we're hoping he starts.
He's smiling, so that's a good sign.
Well, I've just got I'm staying in Manchester tonight, and I've just been given a fake gin and tonic. It's non-alcoholic, so that's why I'm smiling.
Gin and tonic. By its very definition, that's not a gin and tonic. That's a tonic.
I know, it's juice, so I can say that.
Brilliant. Any more questions on Safer Streets? Please do read the documentation when it comes out. Send your feedback and also your thoughts on who should be on that steering group. Ifor's way. Fab. Thank you very much.
Can I just say one final thing before we move off? Yeah, it was just, I know Ronnie was on the walkabout, that the site visit that we did for a few hours some months back. I'm not sure if anyone else is on the call who was on that. And it's just to highlight, my thanks for doing that, because I know we were all doing it under pandemic conditions. So we were trying to do the biggest ever walkabout with lots of people all socially distanced. But it was actually really, really important for the bid. And it was particularly commented on from the Home Office that the quality of the evidence we were able to provide from the community because that helped us to be able to really paint a picture and a narrative about what it's like, and all of that went into that proposal. So for anyone who was part of that, my thanks. And if and Rani, if you're able to pass that on to other members of the group who came out that day, that would be I'd really appreciate that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Amelia, and for everything that you do in support of the community. I know you've worked hard on our behalf over recent months. Penny, it strikes me that the thing we haven't got on the agenda tonight that you might know where we are on is several of us made representations to the scrutiny inquiry back over the summer. What's the latest on where that process is? Oh, have we lost Penny? The excitement to answer this question is clearly too much.
Anne, are you talking about the exempt accommodation call for evidence one?
Yeah.
With Penny not being able to answer, and hopefully she'll chip it in if she does get her sound back, I understand that session took place because I know I had to schedule someone to provide evidence for it. So in Penny's absence, I'm happy to get a summary of that. Or liaise with Penny outside to get a summary for you. But I understand it. Certainly they had the session. Whether that has been finalised in a report, but we can get you an update. And if
that'd be great. It would just be good to know. It would be good to know where it is in the process and what the outcomes might be in terms of the impact on the community in the long run. Because I know several people from the forum. I'm pretty sure Ronnie gave evidence to it. I gave evidence to it. I think Malcolm did. So it would be good to just know where that is in the scheme of things.
I'll chase that up where it is.
Brilliant. Thanks, Amelia.
I think just quickly chipping in, I think they did provide a summary narrative of that evidence that was given. It's a very comprehensive
oh, Zoom is losing its will to live, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, I was just saying they presented a summary following that, which I received a few weeks ago, and there was some feedback on what we thought of the document before they go live with it, but it looked very comprehensive, the review. Yeah.
Oh, that's encouraging. I suppose the key question then is what will happen to it next, and what might influence. Brilliant, thank you. Now, when we met 2 weeks ago, John gave us a really good overview of what's happening around the Commonwealth Games and the community funding that is coming online. Now, I notice that John is with us and not muted. Does that mean you're here, or that your connection's died, John?
I'm here and ready and waiting, Anne.
Superb. John, there are some people here who were here last time. There are some people who weren't. So could we get you to give us a flavour of what the funding is, what's available, and how people might access it?
I will give you a whistle-stop tour with PowerPoint presentation, Chair.
Marvellous. Thank you.
Right. Can you all see that?
We can, but if you could maximise it, that would make some of the later writing easier.
Don't worry. I will be. I've got to go into the. They did this to me last time. For some bizarre reason, the top. Aha! I'm not beaten this time. Right. Right, guys. Hopefully, you can all see that.
Yep.
Excellent. Right. You might not have heard, but Birmingham's got the Commonwealth Games coming our way. So. Hello, I'm John Mole. I work for the Neighbourhood Development Unit. I'm not part of the Commonwealth Games, but we are trying to assist them because they've got quite a bit on their hands at the moment. Let's start with the important bit. How much money have we actually got coming into the ward? Well, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is, if the buttons will want to go, bear with me. Just decided to completely break on me. I apologise most humbly, guys. I will have to go from the off again. Can I just say I hate Zoom with a passion?
Yeah, roll on the day we can go back into the real world.
I'm all right with Teams. It's just Zoom always does this to me, right? From the beginning, once again.
That's not looking keen.
It's not looking happy at the moment. How about that?
Yeah, let's just do it that way.
Right. Okay, we'll go from there. We'll go from there, Chair. Right. So the ward's got £35,000 coming in. Now that sounds like a lot of money. It is not. It is a wee in the ocean. So what I will do, and I've made this offer to several other wards, is if we have got community groups and we are inundated with bids, one, I will try and help them actually get some really good, robust bids in. But what I will also do is look, see if there's any external possible funding that they could apply for, and I will guide them into the right direction. So what is the Celebrating Communities Grants Fund all about? The reality is we've had a nice cynical view from most of the Brummies about the Commonwealth Games coming our way. So this is about just to generate a bit of interest, a bit of oomph, a bit of pizzazz, so that we can get people really excited into what the Commonwealth Games is about. And all 69 wards across the city have actually got funding of various levels. Now there are three key themes. There's Get Active, as you would expect, because it's Commonwealth Games. Ready, Steady, Fun, which is again located around that, and Celebrating Culture. Once an application's in, it's got to hit at least one of those themes, and it has to hit one of those themes. Right, first element, Get Active. We're encouraging communities to get out and be active by participating in sport and recreational activities. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're expecting people to suddenly pick up a cricket bat and start playing cricket. We could even be looking at doing some nice, very low, gentle sort of sporting activities, even doing walk 2Ks where we get groups together just to start walking around parks, etc., etc. So, but we do want people active. The whole thing about the games is it's a sporting element. It's about generating good health, and that's what we're looking for. Ready, Steady, Fun. We want to see community projects which help ensure your local area is games ready. Now, we've had some really, really good ideas coming across the city about this. We've got some fantastic Commonwealth Games flower displays going, where we've got the colours of the Commonwealth coming in. But it's also about, do we want to get some bunting out there? Do we want to clean up the areas so that if it's on the pathway to the Commonwealth Games, we'll just make it look a little bit spruce and a little bit nicer for the area, and also so that we can generate some more interest in the Commonwealth Games. But it's also about celebrating culture. So obviously, the Commonwealth Games is a huge area, and Birmingham is really one of the key areas of the Commonwealth Games. And again, we've seen some really interesting bids come in. We've even had a choir group come to us, and what they're actually going to be setting up is some community choir days, but they're going to be singing in different languages, from different cultures and from different countries. So it's a really wide, flexible program, as much as we can get it for you. Right, funding core criteria. It's got to have links to the Commonwealth Games. And I'm going to stress this throughout the night, because I've seen some really good positive projects be submitted, but they have no connection whatsoever to the Commonwealth Games. What can the funding be used for? Well, it can be used to cover most types of community activity. And this includes core costs. So we will pay for wages if we have to. It's about revenue costs, new and existing projects, and one-off initiatives. How do you submit your application? Well, you can submit it to the email there, and we'll make certain these are actually circulated out to everyone, which is the NDSU at Birmingham. I have got Word documents, so if anybody wants a Word document, or you can just go into Birmingham's website, and they're actually available on the website. I would recommend the Word because I'm an old-fashioned kind of guy. We had a couple of teething problems on the Birmingham City Council site, but it is working, so if you want to go straight through to that, by all means, do feel free to do so. Writing your application. There are 3 different application forms. There's up to £1,000. There is the second application level is from 1,000 to 5,000, and then there's a 5,000 up to 10,000. 10,000 is actually the ceiling of that. And as I've already said, please, please, please align your bid to the Commonwealth Games. It is Commonwealth Games funding. We do want to make certain that an application has a direct line back to the Commonwealth Games. The questions are pretty simple. It's the usual stuff. Tell us about your group, tell us about your project, your idea, and your activities. Now, up to £1,000, we're not expecting War and Peace from that. So provided you can actually say, yes, we've got this really good idea, this is how it links to the Commonwealth Games, we're not going to be too rigid with it. Again, we're trying to be as flexible as possible for our local communities. For £5,000, yeah, we start to think a bit more about this. So this is where we have to start thinking perhaps of the legacy. If you set something up, is it possible that it can go longer than the Commonwealth Games? For instance, if you set up a 2K walking system, walking program, that can go far, far longer than just 12 months. So think about if there's some legacy that you could actually offer there, some sustainability that's going to go in. It will make your application look a lot stronger. And writing a good funding bid, it's a bit like having an exam at school, I'm afraid. So read the guidance in the application form. Once you've done that, read the guidance in the application form. And before you even put pen to paper, read the guidance and read the application form, because it is very, very simple. But just if you start in the right direction, you really can't go wrong with it. Make sure you're answering the questions that were being asked. And I know I've stressed it, make certain you've got the connection to the Commonwealth Games. It is absolutely critical. And then start thinking about your costs. Make sure that your budget adds up. It's something I always say to any group when they're applying for external funding, let alone Birmingham City Council funding. It is amazing how many bids come in at exactly £10,000. Now, that's either an amazing coincidence or you're probably having a little bit of a laugh with it. So think how much your project actually does cost. You don't have to apply for £10,000 because it's up to £10,000. Now, there is also a wonderful moment here, because what we're trying to do is we don't want this to be a Birmingham City Council focused programme. So what we're actually doing is not only are we trying to encourage our third sector, encourage all of our community groups out there, we've now got two really big hitters to try and help with our communities and with the application processes. So what we've actually got, we have a big national agency called Locality, who have become part of the programme, and we have our own inbuilt charity called Birmingham Community Matters. Both of those organisations are going to be helping community groups make certain that they nail it. Now, if you go into the Birmingham Community Matters website, there is a whole section now on the Commonwealth Games. It's got questions and answer sessions, and they're even offering remote funding sessions for everybody out there that wants to sign up to it. And there's a new round starting up pretty soon, I'm told. So really worth going into. Go into the Birmingham Community Matters website. Go in there anyway, because they're a fantastic charity. I've done some brilliant work with them over the years. But for the Birmingham Community Matters and the Commonwealth Games, you really do need to make certain you've got it. So what happens next? Well, all bids are originally reviewed by Birmingham City Council appointed staff. I'm one of the team that's actually doing that. What we're looking for is just to make certain that it's value for money, that the organisation is a legitimate organisation, and that there are no key issues revolving around them. Once we've done that, in the old days, we would then front up the whole thing and start to steer the processes. That's not what we're doing this time, Chair. What we're actually going to do is across the city, we have got third sector organisations now that will be arranging specific one-off or perhaps 2 or 3 off, depending if it's needed, but ward forum sessions, very similar to this. So everybody on this call, we make certain that they get an invite. But for our case in the North Birmingham, it's an organisation called Spitfire Services. I've worked with them for many, many years. I've coerced them into becoming the third sector agency on this because they certainly didn't need the extra work or the headache. But I know, again, they are very, very community focused. And I know Ray's on the call now. So we have a gentleman called Ray Goodwin, who's the Chief Exec of Spitfire Services. And Ray will be working with you all once we've got the applications in and they've gone through the right necessary processes. Ray will then be contacting you all to say we need to have a forum, because the decision lies back with yourselves. It's not going to be a Birmingham City Council decision. This is actually going to be via yourselves, via the community. So the more people that get involved with that and the more activities we have from you all, and we break steering the processes, I'm sure we'll have the right process on it. Told you, I promised you a whistle stop, Chair. Have we got any questions? Immediate silence.
Immediate silence. I feel like we've got down a couple of people as well. If you, Malcolm has a question.
Yeah, just to clarify, so we're talking about for Stockland Green.
Yep.
For this ward, we're talking about 35,000.
Correct, Malcolm. That's absolutely correct. Which could be, which in theory could be 4 bids, which could be 3 at £10,000 and 1 at 5, or it could be a heck of a lot longer than that. I would like to see more bids come in than that £35,000, because then if I can try and assist some of those groups to look towards some external funding, I will most certainly do so.
John has kindly sent through his PowerPoint and his and the application forms to me. If anybody would like them, do let me know and I will send them out. Otherwise, I will send them to Leslie, if that's okay, Leslie, to send out with the minutes. And then everyone.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Great, thanks, Leslie.
And it's just an offer, Chair. If anybody's got any queries, questions that they start to think about, and as the days come by all means, contact me. I would say that we have got a ceiling on when the bids can come in, which is going to be at the end of November. But it'd be nice to see some really good quality bids coming in the next few weeks.
No pressure then.
Not at all.
Debbie.
So
hang on a minute, Malcolm. Debbie has got her hand up.
Hi, sorry, my video's not working. Are there any limits to the sort of groups that can do it? For instance, schools, churches, any group?
Debbie, we have kept this as wide as we possibly can. So yes,
Okay.
any group. What we've even done as well is you don't even have to be a constituted group with a bank account. If you've got an organisation that suddenly turns up with just, I don't know, a few local residents and say, we've got a fabulous idea, what we will try and do is find a partner agency that can actually take the funding for them and then pass that funding out. So we've made it as wide as we possibly can for you all.
Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. Malcolm.
You said that one round had already happened by the 1st
That's
of
correct.
June.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that those have already been announced.
No, they're actually being appraised as we speak. So hopefully there'll be some news in the very near future. We're hoping within the next week to 2 weeks, we should be able to come back to you guys to say which bids have actually got.
So there's a number of groups within Stockland Green that have already, and what sort of cost, what sort of ceiling was that amount for?
As I said, we're appraising the next sort of week to 2 weeks, but it's certainly not the full allocation. We haven't had a huge,
but it's part of that 35,000.
It will be part of that 35, yes. It's not two separate pots to 35. But as I said previously as well, if we get, I would love to see lots and lots of groups come in that actually exceeds the £35,000 barrier, because then it's a challenge for us all then to see what we can do to find some external funding. There are 6,000 trust and grant organisations out there. I'm sure if we've got some really good bids come in that we can find some other organisation that might be able to take up some of the slack.
So who's doing the appraising of that at the moment?
The initial appraisal is done by Birmingham City Council officers. So that's myself and some of my colleagues. But all we are doing is making certain that it fits the criteria for the Commonwealth Games, that it's good value for money. The full appraisal, the full decisions then come back to you guys. So you make the final decision, not me.
And well, at some point, we'll have to work out how we're going to do that.
Well, that's where Ray Goodwin comes in, because Ray's an old hand at this sort of thing, Chair. I can guarantee you're in very safe hands.
We'll have that conversation at some point, Ray.
Yeah, can I just interject? So once the applications have been appraised by the City Council for being, they fit and they fit within the scope, they'll come to me. What I will then do is contact yourself, Anne, to organise a meeting with councillors and whoever wants to sit around the table, and we will then look at the merits of the applications and appraise them and make the formal decisions, which I will then feed back to the City Council. I'm assured once that has happened, that and the COGA has been issued and released, the money can be released very, very quickly, so activity can start. So the idea is going to be a nice, seamless process. For everyone as well who doesn't know me, I am Ray Goodwin from Spitfire Services. I know Stockland Green hugely well. I grew up in Stockland Green. I went to both schools. I went to Slade Road School and I went to Stockland Green Secondary School as it was at the time, and left Stockland Green Secondary School as it was at the time. But we should be a different matter altogether. But so I know Stockland Green, I know the dynamics, and I understand kind of, the how important the community there is as well. So we're going to kind of make this happen in a really good way. The only thing I would say is that if we can have a kind of, running through all the applications, that would be absolutely excellent, which kind of represent what's best of Stockland Green alongside the Commonwealth Games. That would be totally really good. So I'll be quiet now.
Super, thanks, Ray. Alison.
Right, can the applications can they overlap areas? So if I put in a bid for Stockland Green, would it have to be solely for Stockland Green residents, or could it include, say, some people from Aston or?
Ooh, that's the first time that's actually been asked, Alison. So that's a very good question.
Because I'm thinking of, you know, brownies, guides, and scouts and things are all in areas rather than.
I mean, that would certainly, once that application come in, that would be something for you all to discuss. But from my perspective, on the grounds, would I block it from the first stage? No, I wouldn't, because provided the activity originates in Stockland Green, I think it would be a little bit terse of us if we then turn people away that wanted to come from Aston or elsewhere. I think if the application actually stresses that, that would be fine. I mean, Ray's already mentioned the way we're actually going to be paying it. I'm going to be paying it via a conditional grant aid, which is an incredible quick way of actually getting payments out, because I can do it via a BACS process. So within 24 hours, sometimes I can get payments into bank accounts. So I think on the condition to grant aid, I think what we would just make certain is that we are getting a fair share of Stockland Green residency, because we wouldn't want to have a project in Stockland Green only to find that it's only coming from people from Washford Heath or Handsworth. So obviously we would need some sort of counterbalance to that. But come back to your original question, can that be done? Yes, it can. And bids could actually go in. It doesn't have to be just within the one ward. So you might want to do a project that runs across Stockland Green and Erdington. So then we could apply to both wards.
Well, the reason I ask is because I run Stockland Green, I co-run Stockland Green Brownies, and we're in a division that is called Perry Bar.
Okay.
So that's, I'm just wondering if that'll confuse matters.
No, I mean, just stress that on the application.
And you know, it covers Aston and Great Bar and Perry Bar. So
no, that's fine. I mean, so long as you just put that in the application form, that won't be a problem.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Any more questions for John on this? In which case, do crack on, and do feel free to obviously pass the information about this to any other groups that you're part of, because the more people that apply, the better facility we're going to create as we come up to the games. Super. On the basis that we've already covered off a degree of stuff around planning, and Penny is going to set us up a specific meeting looking at planning issues and planning decisions, I'm going to jump over the next item on the agenda and we'll come back to it ASAP when we have the right people in the room, and move on to community updates. We talked a bit around this when we met a couple of weeks, but so Stockland, let's just go down the list. Ronnie, anything to update us on with what the action group are up to at the moment?
Sorry, Anne, I'm not sure if you're saying to me, it keeps breaking up quite badly. Did you just say Stockland Green Action Group?
I did, yes. Any updates?
Hello. Yeah, not particularly. I think the situation is as it's ever been. I think we're trying to work hard with the agencies around us to deal with the issues that are ever present and ever at hand. So I don't want to go into too much detail about that because it's pretty much either bad or going from bad to even worse. But I think we're kind of optimistic in the sense that the powers around us are recognizing the dire situation on the ground, and things might start to make a positive step to be improved. But really that's all I can say about life here at the moment. Okay, thank you. And you know, we just keep on, don't we? We have to keep on applying the levers wherever we find them. Mary, any update from King Standing Regeneration Trust, Friends of Brookvale Park?
The Friends of Brookvale Park, Dave's here, so there's 2 new members at the Friends of Brookvale Park and they're local residents, so that's fantastic. On a bit of a down note, the cafe is pending yet again because there is a tree and the roots of the tree will affect the build. So at the moment the architect is looking to see what can, if anything, be done. It's a slow process and an incredibly frustrating one, but that's where it's at. So we keep banging along with that one. KRT, we've just taken our about to take our 3rd batch of young people. Delightfully, we've got some local people as well, and they're going through our programme, and the park is just proving to be a beautiful place to work. So yeah, it's all good news, with the exception of the cafe that seems to take 4 steps forward and 44 backwards.
Yeah. One day that first cup of coffee will be a very great thing. Penny, you've got your hand up. Is there something you wanted to feed into one of those points?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Mary a really quick question. Do all the members of the Friends of Brookvale Park get invited to the ward forum?
I don't know.
I'm just thinking it would be really good to hear from some of the resident members of the Friends of Brookvale Park. Well, so just make sure for the future.
Yeah, there is. So I suppose the residents are people who are on this forum anyway, so they're invited, but not via me. So yeah, good point. We can share these meetings with on the Friends of Brookvale Park Facebook page.
Oh, that'd be really helpful. Yeah. Thank you. Just because we want to include as many people as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
And likewise, anyone else who's in any other Stockland Green fora, networks, community groups, social groupings, do invite people. Invite your friends and neighbours if they live or work or are connected in to Stockland Green. I don't think there's a size beyond which this group isn't improved, because the more Stockland Green, they become harder to manage, but the more Stockland Green voices we have, the better we represent the ward. So please do constantly be telling people that we exist. Malcolm, talk to us about Slade Road Methodist Church and what's going on with you on Slade Road.
I mean, the good news for the church is the cafe's reopened again on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I believe. So that's beginning to pick up again, and it's quite a little bit of a hub for people. And the serving of food first thing in the morning has been continuing as well, in sort of informal way. I am aware that maybe a bit awkward, but at the same time, it feels very much from the church point of view the right thing to do. So yes, cafe open. I'm, in terms of the only other thing at the churches tends to be, well, we worship obviously on Sundays, and that's coming back together, and we've got just a lovely socially spaced area for worship, and then the big back garden, which is great. But also, I'm rather nervous about post 19th and funerals, to be honest. I really don't know how that's going to be policeable or manageable. The church can quite clearly say we're only going to have so many people and they've all got to wear masks, but people will say, well, we're in distress, and actually masks are not compulsory, they're not government regulated anymore, and we want to come in for the funeral. And how you actually police that is going to be quite difficult. I have raised it actually with the police as well. I'm very concerned about that, but hey ho, that's life. A couple of positive things which aren't from the church in one sense, but are related to it, is the street pastors, which is the street pastor training has been done, and that the street pastors are hoping initially to be on Erdington High Street, but also the other target area is Slade Road, particularly around school finishing times. So we're trying as churches together. It's a separate group called Erdington Street Pastors from the Ascension Trust, but it is under the auspices, in one sense, of churches together. We are hoping to recruit people to be street pastors, which full training is mandatory. It's not a case of optional, it's mandatory. And it's quite a lot of training. But the idea of actually having street pastors out at least sometimes in the week, that should be happening. And I suppose in fitting in with that, churches together are also very concerned about young people, and we have been talking across the churches about safe spaces. You'll be familiar with I think Urban Devotion and the work of Andy Midmill that's created safe spaces in several sort of schools and places after schools, and we're hoping to expand that a little bit. And initially in September, it's likely to happen at St Barnabas, but we're also looking at the Methodist Church being a safe space, using the cafe for young people to be in a supported environment, a place where it's safe, where they can talk and share. And that could kick in after Christmas if all goes well. All these things are dependent on volunteers and the right volunteers, really. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. Dave.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on what you were saying about trying to engage the wider community. And I think that there's generally a real lack of awareness of this ward forum. And also, you know, I understand that it should be published online and go into the public record, but I see a conspicuous lack of Stockland Green ward forums on the YouTube channel, for example, that's under the name of the Neighbourhood Development and Support Unit, I think. So I'd just like to sort of, you know, encourage that these meetings are actually published on that. Minutes and agendas are updated on the relevant websites and things like that, because it just, when you look into the records online, it's just not updated for Stockland Green, and whereas it is for other wards. So, you know, as we push things forward, keep that in mind, and I think it would help engage people somewhat.
I completely agree with you, Dave, on that. This is only, I think, the second meeting we've had in this format, which will be why there aren't any that predate our previous meeting, which was only about 10 days ago. But yeah, I mean, one of the things we need to do as we move forward is make sure things like agendas are published in a timely way, that with minutes and all of those things, we're kind of learning our way into those processes, let's say. But you're absolutely right. Linda.
Oh, you sounded like a headmistress then.
I know, I couldn't see you. You'd vanished from the place you were on my screen.
Oh, okay. Can we add Friends of Witton Lakes into this one? So it's Witton Lodge and Friends of Witton Lakes.
Yep, absolutely.
So it's Witton Lodge Community Association in Perry Common. The Eco Hub is still on course, we hope, to be built at Witton Lakes. They've had to have a week off because of a COVID outbreak with one of their contractors. So, and supplies are proving difficult of certain materials, but they're still saying they might only be a couple of weeks over, which is great. It's looking good. We've nearly got a roof, which is good. And we also are working with Wiley Birch Allotment, the new committee there, newish committee, because they want to provide horticultural training via remotely. So we are working with them to see if we can provide any equipment for them to do that. And as Friends of Witton Lakes, we are continually working at the community orchard and trying to look after the park. We've been removing Himalayan balsam for 3 Sundays running, thousands of them, but invasive plants. But yes, so it's we are working together, and it's useful to have both, because I chair both of those groups, so it's just easier that way. So okay, thank you.
Thank you. So all good stuff happening up at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have to say that both to you and to the guys representing Brookvale Park this evening, the area deans from Birmingham Diocese, so from all over the Birmingham area, we met for a walk one day last week. We started at the top of Witton Lake, and did the sort of the loop of the 2 lakes, and none of them had ever been there before, and were just so blown away by how beautiful they are and what a wonderful haven and resource it is for us. Yes. And somewhat jealous that it's at the bottom of my road.
Thank you.
Marvellous. Anybody else got anything that they think that we could usefully discuss this evening? Any news that we could do with having before we end and make a plan for what happens next? feels a little bit like people might have lost the will to live and need to go get some tea. There's also a cat trying to break its way through my kitchen door. In that case, so the action points that we have coming out of this evening, Penny obviously is going to arrange for us that broader meeting around very specific planning concerns. Ifor and I will be, and others will be working on the next phases of the neighbourhood plan and things like that, and working out the best and the most useful way to start those consultation processes. Ned obviously will be coming online at the beginning of August, so we'll be starting to dig into all manner of different community groups that he can start engaging with in his role. We will, as soon as we can, send out a date for the next meeting of the forum in September. The steering group will meet prior to it. So watch this space for the things that keep coming online, but please do keep on telling the people that you know that we're out there, and that we really just want to engage with as many local people as we can, so that as many local voices as possible can get heard. Apart from that, thank you all for your contributions this evening, and have a great summer.
Yeah,
Thank
you,
you,
Anne.
Thank you, Chair. Good night, all.
Good night,
Thank
all.
you, everyone. Goodbye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.